Earlier this year, I actually experienced a hydration-related emergency while I was alone, and it felt like one big test to navigate this emergency on my own in myself. This is something that I've always been, in a position where I'm observing something in another and able to identify things and work with things. But in this case, this was my own experience, my own hydration related emergency. And I was alone. I didn't have anyone else to help me. So it felt like one big test, not only of what it is that I've studied and what I can identify and what I know to do or when to get help. That in itself was one big test. But then it was also a test of my ability to handle this on my own in myself. What I was able to identify really right there in the moment when it was happening was the fact that it was a hydration related emergency, the fact that it was a life-threatening emergency, that it was not something that was a safe, maneuverable situation that I could easily handle at home. I knew that I needed to have emergency medical care. And I knew that it was neurological in nature. So I knew that the timing was crucial, that I needed to do everything I could to make sure that I got help immediately, that this was not something to play around with. So as soon as I identified this in the moment and I was, in the car on the way to the hospital, taking myself to the ER, that was when the next test kind of came. So at this point, having that ability in the moment to navigate the situation, to identify what it was that was going on and the fact that I needed help, the fact that this was life-threatening, that I need help immediately, that in itself, I was able to remain calm during that entire thought process to be able to identify these things. And I owe a lot of that to the fact that the last couple of years, I have devoted really like an entire practice, if you will, to meditation and mindfulness. It's been a couple of years now that I've been practicing meditation and mindfulness as part of my lifestyle. It's woven into my day as just part of how I operate on a daily basis now. And so being able to tap into that in the moment and to stay calm in the moment so that I could think through logically what was going on and identify the fact that this was life-threatening in nature, that this was neurological in nature, and that this had something to do with my hydration status, because those key areas are important to communicate when you do get to medical personnel and you're trying to explain to them what it is that is going on. All of this, being able to remain calm in the moment, was huge. But then in the car, on the way to the hospital, remaining so calm, this was the next test. Being able to remain so calm physically during this entire time. All of a sudden, my mind started playing tricks on me. And it was like my thoughts were now telling me repeatedly that, see, look, you're totally fine. You just calmed yourself down. This isn't an emergency. You don't need to go to the hospital. You can handle this. You can turn around and go home. You're making a big deal out of nothing. You don't have to waste anyone's time doing anything else because you just calmed yourself down. And it was this big thought loop that was cycling through my mind over and over and over again, basically trying to tell me that it's not an emergency. And yet, so this in itself was another test of whether or not to identify and acknowledge those thoughts or to just observe them as thoughts and let them pass by. So this, for me, another major test that I feel, in hindsight now, confident in the fact that because of practicing meditation and mindfulness, and really because of practicing self-reflection, I was able to, in that moment, stay rooted in the present moment, stay rooted in my body, and be able to identify that I'm having, and really kind of pull myself back mentally to say, okay, I'm having thoughts and I can observe these thoughts, but I don't need to acknowledge or attach myself to these thoughts because they're just thoughts. Instead, when I'm rooted in the present moment, rooted in what is happening in my body right now, I know that there is something wrong. I know that this is an emergency and I'm going to continue driving to the hospital. So this in itself was a huge test for me mentally, if anything, to be able to continue to take care of myself in the way that My body was telling me to take care of this, but my mind was telling me something else. So being able to trust the fact that the thoughts I'm having may not necessarily be true, that I don't have to attach myself to these thoughts, that I can stay true to the moment, stay rooted in the moment, and identify what the true cause is. And my body in this case is telling me that there is something wrong, and I'm listening to that. Huge, huge, huge accomplishment for me to be able to move through those tests and to finally get to the ER and to get the emergency medical care that I needed, because I got there just in time. Had I turned around, had I tried to continue to listen to some of those thoughts and think that I could manage this, think that I could muscle through this and try to tough it out and try to figure it out on my own, it could have been a very different story, a very different ending to that story. And so I owe a lot of absolute gratitude, first of all, for the fact that I found this ability to practice this, really, to practice meditation and mindfulness over the years now, and to be able to, in the moment, use that self-reflection in an otherwise frightening state to be in. This is probably the highest state of anxiety that I ever should have been in, but I was able to remain calm in the moment and detach myself from the thoughts and stay rooted in what is true of the present moment and be able to act accordingly. So I cannot stress enough how important I think for everyone to be able to gain those skills of being able to tap into the present moment, to practice that mindfulness, to practice self-reflection, and to be able to identify what is a real thought to attach yourself to. What is the actual emergency here? Is it what my thoughts are telling me, or is it what is actually real and true in the moment in my body?